Chop, the original Guillotine League podcast. Everything you need to know to avoid the chopping block. Chop is brought to you by GuillotineLeagues.com. Now, your host, Paul Charchian.
It is Thursday. That means it's time to flex around and find out. As usual, I like to get help for this segment, and I begin by bringing in a man whose fantasy football modeling spreadsheets have more variables than Cardi B's spit test. It is Matthew Freedman. Look at that.
That is disgusting. And there's, for the people who aren't watching on YouTube, one, you should be watching. And then two, there's this graphic here. It can be described only as like a drinkable petri dish. That looks disgusting. It is wet though. Speaking of wet, Charch, I think at the end or near the end of the show that we had last week with Thor, we had talked about the idea of, I don't know, some sort of like Thor Thursday or whatever. And it made me think what we really need for Chop is an episode that's called Wet Wednesday. And it's exactly what it sounds like. We're drinking on the show.
I love it.
You are drinking whiskey, and you're
Yes,
talking about like the oakiness of the aging barrel and all of that stuff.
Yes.
I would be drinking beer and talking about sort of like, the subtleties of the Belgian yeast. Then the third person with us would talk about Mike's Hard Lemonade, probably, and talking about their favorite flavors, breaking down, ranking all of the flavors. So it could be a sponsored segment as well.
Oh, I love it. That's fantastic. The catch is, if it's the same person we're using today, that person's going to want to drink wine coolers. I know it. Mike, other co-host today, it's not Thor. A man so devoted to maximizing his guillotine fab that he's investing his fab in Terry Rozier's interpreter. It is Brian Johnson making his Thursday debut. Welcome to Flex Around and Find Out, Brian.
What up, boys? I got to follow the Petri dish, and I will drink all the Mike's Hard Lemonade, every flavor. Amazing. I brush my teeth with Mike. I don't have a problem, though. I swear. Not a problem like Terry Rozier. I feel bad. What if you randomly bet like $10 that night on a Rozier under? I would be sweating right now that Feds are knocking down my door.
They're gonna. That's right. They're gonna be looking at everybody who placed a bet. What if you made a $100 bet? What if you made, what if you just happened to bet big?
You were in cahoots then. If you're betting $100 on a Rozier under, you knew about it. That's for sure.
That could be. First, you'll notice Thor is not here. I want to thank Thor for all of his help these past Thursdays. He's going to be focusing on Fantasy Life's college football coverage. And there's nobody with more guillotine chops, pun intended, than Brian Johnson to replace him. So you are in on Thursdays. You're the new guy, Brian. What if we... Yeah.
More chops. I don't know about that. I usually survive a good amount, but
Yes.
I know what you mean. You mean episode?
Guillotine chops. Yes.
I like how you threw in how I'm pretty cheap with my fab in this episode that doesn't involve fab at all. You had to make mention of that.
That's right. Yeah,
it's an honor to be here.
For that.
Honor to be here, boys, and big shoes to fill with Thor, of course. But I will do my best.
Now, Brian, you're the new guy. What have you been told about the purpose of our Thursday Flex Around and Find Out shows?
Well, these are players that are essentially you would consider dunks on a name basis, right? Especially in a guillotine league. But these are guys that put them in your flex. You're going to F around and find out that you might get chopped. So some guys that you might not be fading in other formats, but you want to do it in a guillotine league where everything's on the line every week, of course.
Absolutely. Now, I really like this booze idea, this drinking on the job idea that Freedman has brought up. I mean, what's going to happen here is when you guys are describing one of your players, I'm going to sneak out when I'm not on camera. I'm going to go get the whiskey, and we're going to start this. We're going to start this Whiskey Wednesday on Thursday. We're going to light this candle right now. That's what's going to happen here. Last week on Flex Around and Find Out, to tell you how big the shoes are that you've got to fill, Brian, we would have combined 7 of 9 on our Flex Around and Find Out players. And Freedman, I think you hit the biggest one of them all. George Kittle. You advised people to show caution on Kittle. And what he ended up doing, he played a lot, but he was blocking a lot. And Christian McCaffrey, who had struggled to run all year long, finally had the big breakthrough running game. And I think it's not a coincidence with George Kittle.
Yeah, Kittle, I mean, obviously one of the best blocking tight ends. And, I'm going to go a little rogue, a little off script. We were talking before the show about Charts. You said that, George Kittle, as great as he is as a pass catcher, obviously an awesome run blocker as well. And, by the time he retires, would be known as, one of the preeminent two-way tight ends in the league's history. And so we kind of started talking about some of, the great kind of dual threat tight ends, the guys who could obviously do it as a pass catcher, but then also as a run blocker. And it made me think of Jason Witten, obviously, Cowboys fan, the Cowboys,
Yes.
and he's eligible for the NFL Hall of Fame this year. He's been nominated for it. I believe he is a finalist. It just kind of begs the question as to whether someone who and as much as I love Jason Witten, I don't think at any point in time he was ever the best tight end in the league. It sort of begs the question of, like philosophically, outside of the quarterback position, should someone be in the Hall of Fame if he was never the best player at his position in any given time?
Well, isn't that as much as anything? Doesn't that Freedman then really reflect on the other players? Because at that point, you could be really, really, really good, but you happen to have a career that overlapped Randy Moss and you were never the
Sure.
best wide receiver for a decade, but you were awesome. The standard for me has always been, are you the person that the opposing team played to stop? Like the game plan against your team was, we got to figure out how to stop Randy Moss. We're going to lose if we don't stop Randy Moss. And the game plan was built around stopping you. To me, that was always my threshold. How about you guys?
Super Bowls certainly help if you're a key player on a Super Bowl team or multiple Super Bowl teams for sure. But yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with you guys. I know Freedman is the one who posed the question, but it's tough. I mean, how many examples can we come up with where guys were the fifth best at their position during their prime that made the Hall?
Well, okay, I'm going to give you an
Yeah.
example. I'll give you an example that I think will bust this thing wide open. Larry Fitzgerald was never, not once, the best receiver in the NFL through his career, and he absolutely is a Hall of Famer.
Okay. Accumulators might be the I don't know, kind of like the exception, but
Mhm.
I would actually push back a little bit on the Larry Fitz. I would need to think about it, look at some of the other guys, but Larry Fitzgerald in his, second, third, fourth seasons, I mean, Larry Fitzgerald in 2008, 1,400 yards, 12 touchdowns, led the league in touchdowns receiving. I mean, maybe for positions where there are two or three guys on the field at a time, then you can sort of get away with being top two, top three, and make the Hall of Fame. And I think at one point you could definitely say Fitz was a top three wide receiver in the league.
Oh, he was it all equivocates to fantasy football in the end, at the end of the day, right? He was a first round pick. Like you just have to, we got to figure out his ADP over his average ADP throughout his career. But he was certainly an accumulator. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Can I just throw out Algie Crumpler? If we're just talking about elite two-way tight ends, Algie Crumpler.
What? Was he an
that.
awesome blocker that I don't?
I feel like he
remember?
had to have been. He had a badonk. I mean, he was a unit. He could box out anybody in the end zone. That's for sure. He was. I feel like he was a good blocker. I'll have to go back and check. But
Vazante Shenko had a badonk. That's a whole different story.
That is it's a different badonk too. Yeah,
it's very different.
Yeah.
Today's episode of Flex Around and Find Out is brought to you by Xfinity. Imagine all your football all in one place with Xfinity. Imagine that. All right, Freedman. I just want to touch on this briefly before we get to our 9 Flex Around and Find Out players. On Tuesday, Brian and I talked about a mid-season check-in, and I posed to Brian, how much fab should Guillotine players have left at this stage of the season? If you're self-reflecting on your fab budget, how much would you like to see people have? And at what point you're like, that's not good?
I'm the wrong person to ask this question of, because I've played Guillotine Leagues. This is now my second year. First year, we had the work league. I made it to the championship game. So I feel like my strategy was sort of justified. However, I was
Yep.
super aggressive on Fab early. And I think I've been fairly aggressive again early in deploying it when there's a guy that I think is a true difference maker, a guy who I think, okay, if I'm playing in the championship game 10 weeks from now, this is a guy who definitely will be locked in to my starting lineup. So I want to be aggressive on those types of players. Man, I mean, I think you are, obviously much more experienced with guillotine leagues, and I think you tend to be more conservative than I am with Fab.
Yeah.
I'm imagining you are probably correct and I'm probably wrong, but if we're thinking we're about halfway there, at this point, you maybe want to have like half of your final lineup constructed. I would maybe want a little bit more constructed just to kind of give me a higher chance of having that weekly floor that gets me
Mhm.
into the playoffs. I would, I don't know, I'd say maybe 40% left, but
Oh, wow.
I,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
don't I don't know. Like I certainly don't have 40% left, but I could see why how that would be like the prudent thing. And maybe you would say, "Hey, I would love to have 60 or 70% left."
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm in that, and Brian and I talked about this on Tuesday. We're in the 60-70% left, $600, $700, hopefully even more left. And in terms of end game players, which is the term that we use,
Okay.
Freedman, we feel like probably 2 or 3 end game players, but the way you're doing it is valid. You can spend early, particularly if you're accumulating the same players you're going to be using in December now. That's key to this. It's those middle players. It's spending $50 on a guy that you can't get to December with several times over. That's where those bids end up really hurting you in the long run.
Yes. Yes,
Sorry.
I agree with that, echo that completely. I think if you are going to spend aggressively early in guillotine, the only way it makes sense is if you are going for a true difference maker, as you say, an in-game player, someone that if you are in the championship game, someone who helped get you there, who helped carry you through the weeks where other guys were underperforming, and that guy gave you a high enough floor to where you weren't chopped, and someone you are just undoubtedly locking into your starting lineup going for that championship. So yeah, I think it all depends on the players who come available. But I'd say the one thing is you definitely do not want to overspend on the guys who are middling talents and who might get you through 1 week, but definitely aren't going to be guys you're relying on in the last third of the season.
And as
I
long
think
as
that
none of those play, well, as long as Saquon Barkley is not a player that you've been spending any money on this season,
yes,
he's
what a disaster.
he's been a
Yes.
frequent star on the Tuesday
Yes.
Yeah.
We're running out of ways to describe Saquon Barkley's many problems on Tuesday's shows, Matthew. He's been on 5 times in
Oh,
our top 10 most chopped players list. Oh, geez.
that's
Saquon
amazing.
didn't amazing. You know what else is amazing? You can get 1 year of Fantasy Life Tier 2 premium product for free with the Comet browser. fantasylife.com/Comet. This gets you everything on Fantasy Life. You get all the tools, the utilization report, the Fantasy Hub. You get all of Freedman's rankings. You get Freedman's rest of season guillotine rankings. You get my weekly rankings for guillotine. It is a $100 value. It is free. This runs for a full calendar year. You will go all the way back to this date in October next year. So you get the rest of the season, fantasy playoffs, next year's draft season, all the way back to now. It is a limited time offer. All you have to do is install the Comet browser, fantasylife.com/Comet. All right, guys, let's flip over to our 9. Flex around and find out players. And I'll tell you this much. I took all 3 of my players representing real flex decisions I am making from my own lineups. And these are all players I've put on the bench. So these are real life for me. Freedman, we begin with you. Our first flex around and find out player is Washington running back Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt against the Chiefs. Is it Sunday night? I think they're Sunday night.
I think Monday night, actually. Monday night. Yeah.
Monday night. Yes, I meant Monday night. Yes.
Yeah, looking at prime time. So a lot of the names, like last week, a lot of the names on my list this week are kind of quote unquote big names, except Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who I guess technically has a big name in terms of the number of letters in his name.
Yes.
But yeah, so quarterback Jaden Daniels expected to be out. The offense could really struggle against the Chiefs. You know, looking at the betting market now, the Chiefs are 12.5 point favorites at
Wow.
home. And
Wow.
I just, if there's sort of like one heuristic that I cling to pretty tightly, it's that I don't really want to be super invested in road dog running backs. You know, like there's so many avenues for that guy not to put up points. And 12.5 point road dogs, I mean, that's just so bad for the Commanders, where they could really abandon the running game early. And then you look at how Krosky Merritt has been used. He's hardly used at all in the passing game. He has just 10
Right.
targets in 7 games this year, and he's in a split backfield. Over the past month, he has one really good game, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. Awesome game. The other 3 games, 57 yards, no touchdown, 68 yards, no touchdown, 32 yards, no touchdown. Just absolutely terrible, like will get you chopped kind of performances. So he has one big game that came in a win. His 3 duds, all losses. And that trend holds true across the season. And I think we are just in line for another game with, 40-ish yards, no touchdowns, and almost no receptions to help boost his production floor. And that just makes him super dangerous. And this is like the least important of the things, but like it's Monday night too, and there's just so much uncertainty. I think sometimes with like the Monday night games where like we don't know if some of the Washington wide receivers are going to be in this game. So it's just
Yeah.
like, all the more like, oh, turns out there's no Debo Samuel, no Terry McLaurin. And then the spread goes from like 12.5 to, like 13 or 13.5. And it's just like, oh man, things just continue to get worse for the Commanders. I kind of want to lock in a running back entering the game where I sort of know like fully what's happening with him, and I have some outs. Whereas like if things really start to go bad with that Washington offense before the game, there's no one else that you can pivot to with Ja'Cory at that point. You're stuck with him. So I think there are a number of reasons to want to pivot away from him early in the week.
All right, I'm going to give you one pivot guy. If it came down to Monday night, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt or Brashard Smith, who ends up with more PPR points? That's a fair question.
That is a great question. And look, in terms of like rankings, projections, you have to go with Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. But, like that's the median play. But it is
Yes.
not hard to imagine a world in which Brashard Smith has more. Um, and I wrote him up in Freedman's favorites this week as sort of like the last running back on the list of like, hey, I know he's like the number 3 guy and he got all this production, but it was in garbage time. But this is another garbage time type of
It
game.
is. Yep.
And so you can fully imagine how it happens.
I think there is a 35% chance Brashard Smith outscores Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt on Monday night.
Yeah.
Brian, your first flex around and find out player ever is Buffalo wide receiver Keon Coleman against the surging Carolina secondary. Talk to me about why you don't trust Coleman this week.
Yeah, not the boldest take for my first
No,
flex
it
around and
really
find
isn't,
out
honestly.
player. But Coleman, coming off his bye, has target totals of 6 and 7 across his last 2 games. So solid usage there. He scored in week 5, so he's been serviceable for sure. Josh Palmer, wide receiver 3. Some may say he's wide receiver 2 for the Bills. Very, very iffy to play in this game. So Coleman could see a couple extra looks in this one. But I hate the matchup against Carolina. To put things into context, I'm going to talk 100-yard games. I know you don't need a 100-yard game right now to Guillotine League, especially from a guy like Coleman. But the Panthers have allowed just 3 100-yard receivers in 7 games this year. One to George Pickens, who is also the only wide receiver to top 6 catches against the Panthers so far.
Mm.
The second 100-yard receiver was Jalen Waddle, who is outside of Pickens, one of only 3 wide receivers to register 6 catches against the Panthers so far. So no wide receiver has 7 or 8 catches against Carolina, which is crazy to me. I don't know if that's possible. So it's 9 and then 6. Diggs had the other 100-yard game. He's also one of those other 3 receivers to register over 5. Then only one other wide receiver outside of those aforementioned receivers has gotten to 5 catches, caught at least 5 balls, and that was Drake London. So I don't have Keon Coleman in those tier of receivers. Carolina's only surrendered 4 touchdowns to the position so far this season. 2 went to the aforementioned Pickens and Waddle. It's just an awful matchup for wide receivers, especially the number 2s. The real path to success against the Panthers secondary is through the tight end. And I would play Dawson Knox over Keon Coleman in my flex spot if it boiled down to it, honestly, in this game. Even with Dalton Kincaid making his return. Yeah.
I've got Keon Coleman, wide receiver 40. That is almost exactly where Freedman's got him as well for guillotine use. You're right. This isn't the most. This is not your boldest take of all time. I'm going to be honest with you. I think Coleman is a pretty easy sit candidate in this one. Those cornerbacks, those young cornerbacks in Carolina, are really good. My first flex around and find out player, also not the strongest of takes. If I'm just being honest with some self-assessment here, Juwan Jennings going up against Houston. First, God bless Juwan Jennings for playing through 5 broken ribs and 2 sprained ankles. Who does that? That's insane. If I had 5 broken ribs and 2 sprained ankles right now, I would be on medical leave from this podcast, let alone having a 250-pound guy ramming his helmet into my ribs at 20 miles an hour. Forget it. Jennings returned from those injuries last week, had a huge uptick in usage, so you might be tempted to start him here because he led all the Niners receivers in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. But you can't flex around and find out against Houston. This is the wrong secondary to take a chance against. They allow the 6th fewest fantasy points to receivers. Just 3 wide receiver touchdowns allowed all year. Only the Broncos have allowed fewer wide receiver touchdowns. And only Jackson Smith and Jigba has topped 72 yards against Houston since opening week. Ricky Pearsall might return. That would cloudy the receiver group as well. Juwan Jennings out as a flex around and find out player. Sports fans, you've got to have Xfinity. You get all the games all in one place. You get Sports Zone. That's got every pro football game and over 1,000 college games. You get highlights. You get alerts all in one place. There's multi-view. You get to view up to 4 stadiums at one time and presumably what's happening in those stadiums. You get Xfinity Fan View. That's live scores, odds, and stats all in one place, personalized to you. You get Xfinity Enhanced 4K for simply stunning visuals and the voice remote. Just say football or just say Juwan Jennings, 5 broken ribs. Imagine all your football all in one place. It's easy with Xfinity. Learn more at Xfinity.com. Restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees extra and subject to change. All right, guys, let's get back to our flex round and find out players. Freedman, your second player is Dallas wide receiver George Pickens at Denver. This is a battle of 2 titanic forces. Pickens has been great. So has the Denver secondary.
Yeah. I mean, Pickens obviously has been amazing. He was great when CeeDee Lamb was out. He was great last week, even with CeeDee Lamb returning. And I liked Pickens last week. This week, though, is very different. It's a tough spot. The Cowboys are on the road against the Broncos. The Broncos have one of the league's best home field advantages. Over the past 5 years, it's been the number 2 home field. And then over the past 16 games, it's been the number 1 home field. Long-term, out of all of the current stadiums, it's been a top 5 all-time home field advantage. So just a legitimately good and real home field advantage the Broncos have. And then, we have the game projection model at Fantasy Life. And, I do research and kind of think about the different things that go into it. And home field advantage isn't this static thing. It can be determined based on, you sort of have the baseline, and then it goes up or down if a team that you're playing is in your division, or if it's in the same conference, or if it plays in a similar environment in terms of like indoor or outdoor stadium, or if the surface is the same. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because the Cowboys are on the absolute wrong side of all of these factors. The Cowboys are out of division, out of conference. They play indoors on turf versus outdoors on grass. So I'm on the Broncos in this spot anyway from a betting perspective, and that makes me a little bit lower on the Cowboys. And then there are the specifics of the matchup. The Broncos are number one in fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. The Broncos use number one cornerback Pat Surtain in shadow coverage, but he doesn't travel often into the slot. And I think that means he's going to be on Pickens
Yep.
for most of the game on the perimeter, while Lamb plays most of his snaps on the inside. And that just makes it an incredibly tough matchup for George Pickens. Something like 50 yards without a touchdown, maybe even fewer yards. Like that's well within the realm of possibility for Pickens. So as much as you relied on Pickens when CeeDee Lamb was out, and as good as Pickens was last week with CeeDee Lamb, it is just an absolutely different set of circumstances this week. And that makes me, to use a word that Thor would say, trepidatious for using Pickens this week.
You've got him at wide receiver 25. I have him at wide receiver 23. Opposite Patrick Surtain is Riley Moss. Riley Moss is allowing the lowest completion rate of any starting cornerback on passes thrown into his coverage. So there's really nowhere to hide Pickens on the field either. So I'll add that in for a little extra juice on top of that. Brian, your second flex around and find out player. Also not super daring here. New England wide receiver Kayshon Boutte. That's my guy, but he goes up against Cleveland. Why do you not like him here?
Well, first off, I've decided during that awesome justification for sitting Pickens, I'm convinced by Freedman. I've removed Keon Coleman. I put in Khalil Shakir as my first receiver to fade. So
you're gonna be a backfill that.
I've upgraded the boldness there a little bit. I think it still applies after further review. Kayshon Boutte, not the boldest of calls, but in the bipocalypse, I think people are looking to start him coming off two big games where he totaled 3 touchdowns. Not riding the lightning against the Browns, though, who since week 3 have yielded 5+ catches to just 4 opposing wide receivers. 2 of those 4 were Amon-Ra St. Brown and Justin Jefferson, who both had 7 catches. That's kind of a low catch total for both of those receivers. Cleveland got blown up in week 2 by Baltimore, who totaled 4 wide receiver touchdowns in that game. But since then, the Browns have surrendered just 4 to the position, and they've gone to next tier players like Sun God. He had 2, Jordan Addison and DK Metcalf. Certainly next level players compared to Kayshon Boutte, at least right now. In New England, bottom 8 in pass play percentage. They run a lot. Their defense is coming on strong. The Browns offense, they're not playing Miami this weekend. They're going to struggle a little bit more. So I'm putting Boutte firmly on the bench this week. Again, not the boldest of calls, but I think some people will be contemplating starting him, and I would advise not to.
I'm going to stay in the same game, and I'm breaking one of my own rules that only I think Matthew knows about right now. Last week, I was like, you know what? We got to challenge ourselves and not just throw out insert running back here against Cleveland's awesome run defense every week. And then, so what do I do? That was last week. So then what I do this week is I sign up for Ramondre Stevenson against Cleveland's awesome run defense this week. But I'm only doing it. My justification is he has scored 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games, 6 teams on bye. He's coming off a season best 88 yards. There's the Cleveland run defense right there. That's Juggernaut from the Marvel universe. I believe he's a Marvel character.
That looks more like Quinshon Judkins to me. Isn't that the Judkernaut?
Well, he's number 99. I think that is the embodiment of the Browns.
I'm ruining the segment right now. I'm sorry.
That looks good. No, it's fine. Stevenson coming off a season best 88 rushing yards. That, by the way, that's his highest output in a year. But here's what you need to know about Stevenson. And I'm a Stevenson fan. 3 really good games, 4 really bad games on the year. Those bad games, he gets you chopped. In those 4 dud games, he averages 7 carries. That's it. 22 rushing yards, 13 receiving yards. That's 4.5 PPR points, and that is a chopping. Cleveland's a great run defense. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you already know that if you're the kind of person who's into this podcast for 30 minutes. Number 1 in rush defense success rate, number 2 in rush defense EPA, number 1 in yards before contact, number 1 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. Ramondre Stevenson. Let's see. For Ramondre Stevenson Freedman, you've got him at running back 20 this week. Do you have any other feelings on Stevenson? Any reason for more optimism than I just gave here?
Yeah, Charge. So I want to get your thoughts on sort of because the cut line moves up every week.
Every
And
week.
so
Yes.
what we need from our guys needs accordingly to move up. And so what do you think is, let's say from someone's RB2 position, what do you think is sort of that number of points that we are hoping to
Great
get
question.
in order not to get chopped?
So, yep, great question. So here at this stage of the season, as we're looking at week 8, you need to get into the 80-point range to avoid your chopping. You got 8 players started. You better be getting about 10 out of every position, but that's
Mhm.
to get you at chopping level,
Yeah.
right? So I really want to be at 12, 14 PPR points per player,
Yeah.
ideally.
So
And
Yeah, I think with Stevenson, it's fascinating because I'll say I wrote him up this week in Freedman's favorites, but it's a very specific type of Freedman's favorites. And I did say like I would actually be comfortable using him in guillotine leagues, but I think
wow.
here's the context with it. And this in no way invalidates Charge anything you said because the Browns defense is a juggernaut. All of the things you said about them, like one of the top defenses, specifically one of the top run defenses in the league. But since number 3 running back Antonio Gibson suffered his season-ending injury in week 5, in the 2 games
Yep.
since then, Stevenson has really been locked in as the lead back for the Patriots. And so even if he has a game where he has, I don't know, 20, 30 something yards, it's not like you want that at all from your running back. But even if he has a performance like that, given that the Patriots are 7-point home favorites, uh, I still think that Stevenson has a pretty good chance of scoring a touchdown. And then there's all of the usage on top of it to where
Mm.
if they actually end up having a pretty big game, he could still have like 50 to 75 yards and maybe 2 touchdowns. And what I do like about Stevenson is that he has the ability for a big guy still to function within the pass game. So I think based on the matchup, it would be easy to look at it and say, I'm just sort of staying away. But I guess what I'm saying is, given the matchup, this is kind of the best case scenario that we have in terms of all of the other factors with him at this point now pretty cleanly being the lead back for the Patriots, being at home, being a favorite of at least a touchdown, some places 7.5 points. So being a pretty
Mm.
significant favorite at home. So it makes it tricky because of all of the bye weeks to where
Yes.
like you see the matchup and you think, oh man, I really don't want to start him. And because of the buys, you might have to. And my thought process is he's probably not going to have a high ceiling, but his floor would be better than we might expect given the severity of the matchup. So I don't know if I really fully answered the question, but it's just like it's balancing like, man, I've got this tough matchup and I've got this like this Mageddon to where I need to fill somebody in here. I I think Stevenson has a pretty good chance of finding the end zone. And if that happens, then you're probably safe from the chopping block.
I'll
All
throw
right.
this out there in defensive
Yeah.
charge. I guess it would be in defensive charge. Stevenson one fumble though, right back in the doghouse. There's always a decent chance of
That's
that.
I don't
true.
know. Maybe he's gone like 3 weeks without a fumble, so maybe he's earned the right to fumble again. I don't know. Stevenson or Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt?
Oh man.
Stevenson there.
Yeah. Yeah. I would, man,
Game
let me,
script is going to
yeah.
favor the
Well, they both
Yeah.
have the game script is in Stevenson's favor. He'll catch a couple of passes that Krosky-Merritt probably won't.
Yeah.
So
I think they're in the same tier. I would go with Stevenson.
yeah, I've got Stevenson a couple of spots higher. And by the way, if you think I don't pay attention to the show and trust what you guys say, I do. I move my rankings around. I keep my rankings spreadsheet open. I move my rankings around based on some of the tidbits that you guys drop. Right now, I've got Ramondre Stevenson sitting at running back 23. Oh, by the way, we can safely ban Travion Henderson from this segment ever again. Remember, we were burning cycles on telling people not to start Travion Henderson in this
Oh
segment
man.
early on in the season. Now the question is, should you just drop? Okay, I'm asking, starting with Brian, drop outright Travion Henderson.
Man, I still
Guillotine,
feel like you have.
specific
I get it.
guillotine.
Yeah. I think you still have one, fluid bench spot where you can just hold them and pray for another week. And this might be the week, if Cleveland, or I'm sorry, if New England really runs it up on Cleveland. But after this week, yes. But I think you can hold them for one more week. We'll see. And maybe I'm not predicting or wishing injury upon Stevenson, but it seems like whenever I drop a backup running back, the starter gets hurt. So I wouldn't do that just yet with Stevenson, but it's pretty borderline. But one more week I'm holding.
Stevenson, Guillotine Leagues, dropping Travion Henderson.
Yeah, I can imagine it. I'm fine with it. And I'll say, bringing it back to Brashard Smith this week, I have Brashard Smith ranked one spot ahead of Travion Henderson. Like that's the sign for how low he has fallen. That like it's like, oh, the guy who's third string and might get mop up duty, I'm ranking him ahead of Travion Henderson.
Agreed. I've got Brashard Smith 4 spots ahead of Henderson, and I think you drop him. This format, it's week 8. You should have better flex options at all the different positions: tight end, wide receiver, then Travion Henderson. You're basically it's just a handcuff and nothing more. All right, we still have 3 more flex round and find out players. We'll have to go quickly through these. Freedman, you went to bat with George Kittle last week, and you hit on it, and you're right back to George Kittle this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's probably going to be my best red flag call of the year, right? He had just 2 targets, no receptions. Yep. You're not going to get a goose egg from Kittle all that often, but he was returning from injury with the hamstring, and I thought he didn't look like I thought he looked fine, but he didn't look like fully healthy. And he had an 86% route rate based on the utilization report that we have in Fantasy Life. He was out there running the routes, but he had just a 9% target share, 7% share of air yards, which is just unfathomably bad. Like, how injured does George Kittle have to be for the team not to have Brandon Ayuk, not to have Ricky Pearsall, not to have, Deebo Samuel, who was traded in the offseason? They have a hobbled Jawan Jennings. How hobbled does Kittle have to be for all of those circumstances and for the team to target Kittle less than 10% of the time? Right. Especially when he's actually out there as a full-time route runner. Like, he was basically just a decoy. And, I mentioned last week, the 49ers have a history of rushing players back from injury before they're ready. And I think we kind of saw that last week with how Kittle performed. When healthy, obviously the dude is awesome. I just don't think he's healthy. Like, I need to see him look like himself, produce like himself before I can comfortably put him in a lineup. And then there's the matchup. And Charch, you touched on this earlier when talking about Jawan Jennings. That Texan secondary is really good. Number 5 in fewest fantasy points allowed to the tight ends. And then there's an added wrinkle. Head coach DeMeco Ryans used to be the 49ers defensive coordinator. He knows that 49ers offense really well. So for just another week, I think there's a lot of downside with Kittle. I want to see him look good before putting him back in a lineup. So if you have another reasonable option, like Oronde Gadsden, maybe you're able to get him fairly cheap off of waivers this week, whoever it is. If you have another reasonable option, I would consider it.
All right. Now, I looked, as you're talking, I'm like, oh man, I bet I have Kittle ranked a little high for my Guillotine ranking. So I looked and I've got him at 4. Then I look on the screen, you've got him at 4.
That's where I have him. And that's the thing. Like, you would think, oh, George Kittle without all of the other wide receivers, all the other pass catchers in that offense, ranked number 1, So like, putting him at 4 is sort of like I don't want to say it's like the sign, but it's just like, I'm trying to split the middle ground. And maybe by the time we get to kickoff, I drop him down a few more spots. But if this were last year, George Kittle is number 1, so I feel like I'm trying to balance between where my heart wants to put him and where I reasonably need to have him.
Brian, your final flex around and find out player, Tampa Bay wide receiver Sterling Shepard. Keep thinking like eventually the ball's got to find him, and it really just doesn't as he goes up against the Saints.
Well, believe it or not, the ball found him 7 times last week, caught all 7 targets for 25 scoreless yards. That is prime Kendall Wright territory for those who remember Kendall Wright.
Wow, nice job.
Yeah.
Nice throwback.
He used to put together like 100 catch seasons for like 700 yards and 1 touchdown. It was incredible. But yeah, Shepard's going to see plenty of run in this game with Mike Evans out indefinitely, essentially, and Chris Godwin already ruled out. Emeka Egbuka certainly most likely will play. He's questionable right now, but it didn't look like he aggravated his hamstring injury last week. Tez Johnson coming on strong. Like those two far more than Shepard in this game. I don't like the matchup for any Bucs wide receiver, though, on paper. Saints own the third lowest opponent passing play percentage in the league. Their opponents are passing just 49.9% of the time against them. Opposing wide receivers as a whole are averaging 10 catches for 138 yards. That's the whole unit. Those are awful numbers. So just out on Shepard, even though he's going to be on the field a ton. 7 catches last week. People are going to like that utilization, but not much of a ceiling for Shep, and he's not going to come close to 7 catches in this game. Probably not 5, probably not 4. So he's firmly on the bench for me as well.
Sterling Shepard, your final flex around and find out player. Our last one, mine. Kansas City wide receiver Hollywood Brown going up against Washington. We already talked. We all think it's going to be an ass kicking, and the Chiefs are going to do great in this game. But I think he's exactly the kind of flex player that this whole segment is about. So Rashee Rice returns last week. Hollywood Brown still scores a touchdown, but that masked Hollywood Brown's downside, which is pretty severe here. With Rice coming back last week, Brown fell to only 19 routes run and 27 snaps, both his lowest of the year. Brown was targeted just 4 times last week. That was his second lowest target total of the year. And if you're Patrick Mahomes, you go back to pass. You look over the middle of the field, Rashee Rice. You look right, there's Xavier Worthy. Also, Travis Kelce, crossing route. I think the fourth option, and maybe it's fourth and a half option, is now Hollywood Brown, tied with Juju Smith-Schuster, who had basically the exact number of snaps and routes. I just think talking about a guy tied for fourth in the passing order is not reliable for guillotine use, not in week number 8. It's Washington. This is a very struggling defense, but I think that's going to materialize in a run-heavy game script for a lot of this game, as we've already alluded to once. Isaiah Pacheco, perhaps sitting on the best game of his season coming up in this one. Guys, I'm out on Hollywood Brown. Any thoughts, Freedman?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of things in terms of the betting market. And if it were announced on Friday, Hollywood Brown tweaked his hamstring in practice, he's going to be out this game, the betting line would move not at all. I mean, it would be like, oh, that's right. Interesting. Okay, well, business as usual. I mean, whether the Chiefs win or lose this game and the degree to which they win or lose will not be impacted at all by, the absence or presence of Hollywood Brown. And those are the kinds of guys that, like, if a team doesn't need to rely on him, that just makes him inherently really dangerous.
Really, almost all Chiefs players in the pass game could be dangerous, with Jaden Daniels likely to miss this one. And we mentioned it earlier, we're not sure about Debo or Terry McLaurin. So if they don't get it done early in the pass game, it could be we're going to see a lot of Pacheco and Brashard Smith in this one would think.
No, I love Rashee Rice in this game.
No, I didn't say bench. No, I did not by any means say bench Rashee Rice. He's an auto start.
All right, I'm going to let you clarify that. Okay, all right.
But Xavier Worthy, a little dicey in my mind. I'm not saying sit him in a guillotine league by any means, but I don't know. We might not see a ton of passing by Kansas City come the second half in this game.
Producer Matt LaMarca noting Sterling Shepard, just the third player since 1948 with 7 catches in a game and 25 or fewer yards. That's amazing. The only players that have managed to do that, Travis Kelce and James Jones. You guys remember James Jones?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's
number 89. 89 at the Packers.
How about that? Yes. Last thing I want to mention.
I can't believe Kendall Wright didn't do it. I got to double check that.
Yeah, that's right. You think we might want to look up Kendall Wright while we're at it?
He had 8 catches for 20 yards once, probably.
That could be. Maybe at the 20, he went over the 25 yards. He had 26, 8 catches for 26 yards. Final reminder, you get 1 year of Fantasy Life Tier 2 premium content for free with the Comet browser. FantasyLife.com/Comet gets you everything that Fantasy Life does. all the tools, utilization report, all the fantasy hub, all the trade optimizer, the whole bit. It's everything included, all the Guillotine rankings, $100 value for free. You just download the Comet browser, fantasylife.com/Comet. All right, guys. Great job, Freedman. Brian, you've got your feet wet in Flex Around and Find Out. Matthew Lamarca, thank you for all your work behind the scenes. We're very happy to be here, and we'll be back on Tuesday to help give you waiver wire bidding advice